Welcome to Abolishing Authority. I'm your host, Michael Freeman. I'm here to bring you completely uncensored Liberty Media content on a weekly basis. This week's episode is titled Cannabis Compassion. I am joined by two cannabis activists, Alan Gordon and former gubernatorial candidate Ann Armstrong, who are also located in the Rhode Island and the Providence plantations along with me. They are both pretty close friends who I've met in the past year or so, who offer a differing perspective than my usual anti-state first principle. So I wanted to offer to bring them on the show. They help me in lots of ways, and I figured I could help to sell their brand as well. So Ann, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, well, my name's Ann Armstrong, and I've lived in Rhode Island all my life, and I have 7 children. I have 13 grandchildren, and I'm an electrical engineer. And about 4 years ago, I became a medical cannabis patient, and it completely changed my life. I lost 65 pounds. I got healthy. I lost all the middle-aged lady problems that you have. And it really opened my eyes to the fact that a lot of the things that I believed all my life were wrong. And it started me on a journey of self-discovery that led to my running for governor, meeting a lot of wonderful, interesting people, and now hosting here at my farm in West Greenwich a healing center where we intend to provide cannabis to people who need it without them having to worry about money as a consideration, because you really shouldn't have to worry about that when you're sick and you're suffering. So.
All right, well, Ann, welcome to the show. You know, I met you, and it was kind of bizarre to me, to be quite honest, but we met at an anarchy meetup, and in my opinion at the time, you came off as more of a leftist, right? And you were promoting yourself as running for governor, and I can't lie in saying that I was slightly off-put by that, being my non-state solutions, general stance. But we got to know each other, and you obviously helped me out sometimes in a big way. So, we became good friends, and I just wanted to extend the invitation because I know both of you guys are much more educated as far as the science of cannabis and the way that it interacts with the body. And I'm not going to go as far as to say that it heals cancer yet, but this can be your opportunity to convince me. So yeah, I really appreciate you coming on, Ann, and I care about you dearly. You're a great gal, and I know the healing center that you guys are doing over there is promoting really good works and on a free market level. So it's something that I am behind. So Alan, what's up with you?
Well, Michael, it's great to see you again. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers.
I'm a cannabis activist for a quarter century. I'm as radical as they come. In the late 1990s, I went up and down the East Coast turning myself in for cannabis offenses in college towns, getting increasingly larger and larger. For instance, going into a judge's office with 100 live plants in Pennsylvania, 1998. And I represent myself, usually with a medical defense, and win most of the time. Since then, I've just got so fascinated by this wrongness that the American public was putting up with regard to cannabis law that I just studied it and studied it and studied it to the point where I could perform as well in a cannabis case as a lawyer. In fact, better. The only time I ever hired a lawyer was the only time I ever lost a big case. Did 6 months in prison for a grow in Georgia. The other cases I won. Since that time, I've gone to the UK and picked up an actual law degree, and I've had my my Georgia conviction, where I did time, pardoned.
Are you wearing that law degree wig right now?
I am. It looks like a barrister's wig, but no, I've not moved on to the bar. Right now, I'm involved with some legal research, but I'm not a member of the bar at present. We'll talk more about that, what we're doing later on.
Yeah. Well, I'm personally glad that you decided not to go work for the state myself.
Thank you.
Yes, and I know you're both formally educated in at least in some of the aspects of the ideas that you promote, and as you both know, I thoroughly agree with the majority of it, aside from, you know, state legislation. So when I met Ann, as I had mentioned earlier in the show, it was at this anarchy cookout in Purgatory, Massachusetts, which is kind of the perfect place to do it. And she was running for the governor of Rhode Island at the time. And as I also mentioned earlier, all three of us are in the state of Rhode Island right now. And I supported Ann's movement. I supported the things that she was trying to accomplish. However, I will never bring myself to vote. I will never try to impose majority will upon the minority or anything along those lines, legitimize the system through doing so, and basically threaten people and have other people commit violent actions in my name. I can't do that. However, I was behind Ann, and I supported what she was trying to do in a limited capacity. I would always come, I donated, etc. So, Ann, you want to talk about, you know, less about the politics, but more about your agenda, your end game, your propaganda. What was your goal here?
Okay, well, my main goal in running for governor was certainly not actually to become governor, because then I would have to go there every day and do work that I don't want to do. But what I had said I would do as governor is specifically write pardons and reprieves, because in the Constitution the governor is allowed to write reprieves, which would suspend the power of the state to impose a sentence for the entire time basically that I'm governor. So if someone is charged with a cannabis crime, they wouldn't be penalized while I'm governor for 4 years or 8 years. And I can also write pardons, which would completely remove the penalty, subject to the ratification of the Senate. But what I was really looking for was the bully pulpit of running for an office, because when I said I'm running for governor, people started to listen to me. You know, all of a sudden, I wasn't this wacky hippie lady from West Greenwich. I was running for governor, and there was this one.
Well, I think you were both of those things, but all right.
Yeah, right. Yes, I was both.
So what was the platform on your running?
Well, first of all, compassion, and that doesn't just mean cannabis. It means that the way we treat each other and the way we look at each other has to be with the point of view of what can we do for each other? How can we help each other? And how can we make each other's lives easier, rather than how can we just build ourselves up at everyone else's expense? Okay, I'm building a community here of people who are committed to helping each other and standing in for each other. When there's no hunger, there's not going to be this opening for government to come in and say, oh, we need a program to feed the hungry. If we fed our own people, there wouldn't be a vacancy for government to come in and fill. If we took care of ourselves and made sure that if someone was acting up, the community settled it with them, there wouldn't be a vacuum for authorities to come in. And so the fact that there's wars on poverty is because we allowed there to be poverty, and the fact that there are police supposedly protecting us is because we didn't really look after ourselves, and the so-called statist mentality that there needs to be this overarching entity that provides for our needs and keeps us safe and makes our decisions for us is a myth that will never come to fruition, because the minute you build an organization with somebody driving, no matter how good that first driver is, the minute they get out of the seat, someone else is going to get in. You don't know where they're going to drive that car. Right. So had I become governor this time, really all I would have done is sat there and gently applied the brakes to try and slow that thing down, because ultimately in a compassionate society where we take care of each other, we won't need government. There won't be need for the state. People won't think they would need it because they'll be satisfied with what they have in themselves.
So I think the last time we had this conversation thoroughly, you were, you know, kind of stuck in between a little bit. Not as I wouldn't have called you a statist, don't get me wrong, but you were still kind of wrapping your head around some of the ideas of anarchism. So Would you say that at this point you oppose the state?
I don't think I'm an enemy of the state.
Oh, well, I think they think you're their enemy.
I don't. Well, in a compassionate world, there's really no enemies. So, and I don't think the individual people in the state, the workers and the politicians in the state, I don't think they're intrinsically evil any more than I think I was intrinsically evil when I used to work for Raytheon and design torpedoes.
Sure, right. This is.
I was a person feeding my kids and paying my mortgage. Okay.
This is the reason that I call this show Abolishing Authority. And I was used to be an agent of the state as well. And I know that Raytheon is technically a private government contracted organization, but that's fascism in my opinion, so it's the same thing. I used to be an armed agent of the state as well, and the expeditionary type. And, you know, most people are duped, I think. I think that most politicians are duped, most cops are duped. Like, most people think they're probably doing well, but there are, I'm sure, a vast minority of people who don't and just like power and like violence. Like, the reason that I call this Abolishing Authority is it's not because the individual is the problem. It's not because of Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or George Bush 43 or Eric Holder or whoever it is. It's because of the perpetuated system that surrounds it, or that is the center of it. You know, this hallucination of the idea of authority that's illegitimate, irrelevant, and highly inefficient, I think. Right, so that's just why I ask you about the gubernatorial candidacy. Because I don't think that you believe in a state solution, Anne. You know.
Well, here's an example. Well, let me just check. Can we bring up the idea of how we were going to get free cannabis for people?
Sure.
Okay. You know how a hybrid car uses regenerative braking?
Sure.
Make something.
Oh, I know. Okay, that's a lie. I don't. I have no idea what that means.
Okay. The car that got smashed up in the accident right before I met you, which is why I had broken ribs when I met you.
Yes.
Okay. That car, my car was a hybrid car, like Prius. Mm-hmm. So the way the brakes work, you don't actually have brake drums that use friction and get hot to stop the car, because that's waste. That's like opposing a motion with just a wasted motion.
So, Alan, what would you call yourself if you had to apply an ism? How would you politically, philosophically, or ideologically classify yourself?
Lion of Jah.
Okay. Okay. You know, what I'm trying to get at here is you and I have talked in depth in person about the ideas of liberty and individual freedom and voluntary association, and we tend to agree on most things. I cannot come up with a hard line that we have disagreed on. So what are your principles? What do you believe in? If anything, what do you believe is wrong or right with human society, human interaction right now?
You know, it's hard for me to even say, because I couldn't even be comfortable or healthy without cannabis, but it wasn't before I was 13 years old that I was bucking the system, got suspended from my first school. It's been a fight ever since then, so I don't have any adult life other than fighting for my cannabis. So until this is settled, I can't really even get a good look at anything else. I can't think straight. So we're going to sort this cannabis issue, and government's going to get out of the way. No government has ever had an effective cannabis policy.
No government has ever had a well-done prohibition of any kind, in my opinion.
People that don't love cannabis making rules that cannabis lovers should follow, when they don't know anything about it, they're still thinking of it as a vice instead of a medicine, and even if it were a vice, they should mind their own business. Fact of the matter is, everything they said it does harmful to you, it in fact cures. They've been lying to us for decades, and it's the lightning rod politically for what is wrong with governance in general.
Speaking of decades, from what I understand, you were a 1960s Vietnam anti-war protester.
That's not actually true. I was not even born until 1969, but my mentor,
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
my mentor is an activist.
I will be editing that out. I'm sorry.
No, it's an important distinction, but my mentors in activism were, I grew up in Abbey Hoffman's, the same county as that, literally right down the road from Abbey Hoffman, associated with Woodstock organizers and some of the original musicians. So I'm a child of the 60s through and through, although I technically wasn't born until a couple months after Woodstock.
And where do you stand on the anti-war movement now? Because, you've thanked me for my service a few times, and I don't believe that I ever served anybody except for the collectivists and the nationalists, right? So where are you on that now? Where are you on Iraq or Afghanistan or Somalia or the drone program or?
As an international law scholar, I'm deeply offended at America's quite unlawful use of force and the threat of force around the globe. And when I thanked you for your service, it was for the intent with which you entered that service, not for anything you did in particular for me. I just know that you were lied to, and I can tell by your character that you didn't go in there with bad intent of just crush and dominate, and you figured it out when you saw it up in front of you, and I honor your intent to serve.
Well, I mean, my intent personally was really money, and a girl may have been involved. But yeah, I wasn't going there to try to hurt anybody or aggressively invade anybody. That's for sure. So international law degree.
I don't have a degree in it, but I took the top of my class in international law course while in law school.
Okay.
And I'm not unfamiliar with it. My professor for that course was probably the world's top expert in the lawfulness or lack thereof of threats of force from one state to another. It's a fascinating topic.
That's international threats from one nation state to another.
That's correct, yeah.
Right, okay.
And so with a country the size of the United States, it just waggles its might, just raising an eyebrow can force another country to do what it wants economically just because they know America can send in superior air power, say, and without ever actually using any of that force. The threat of force can coerce the will of a nation, of a people, of a culture or ethnicity, and it's a serious international consideration. And when it comes back to cannabis, you look at one man, Harry J. Anslinger, the guy that wrote the cannabis law for all of the U.S., essentially wrote the global cannabis law, the UN treaty, and used the U.S.'s military force to force it on the rest of the globe, to force other countries to sign it or else face American either military or economic wrath.
I was unaware of the... Yeah, I've honestly just never heard that before. International cannabis sanctions?
The United Nations requires all member states to ban cannabis production, trade, and use.
I mean, I'm not surprised by that. That's just what governments do. But yeah, I'd just never heard that before. I mean, you guys know my position. I believe that it's a flower. I don't care if it's a flower or a nuclear bomb or an AK-47 or anything that doesn't harm another person. I don't require permission to utilize it, right?
Well, whether it's a nuclear bomb.
Sure.
You said, but as long as it doesn't harm another person, how could you?
Well, until I use something to harm other person, I've victimized no one, so I don't have a problem with that. No, but that's pre-crime in my opinion. Just because I own something doesn't mean that I've hurt anybody. And in my opinion, if there is no victim, there is no crime, whether it's on an international scale or a peer-to-peer interaction. So my owning a nuclear bomb doesn't hurt anybody. It doesn't affect anybody's life except for mine.
I suppose if it's stored very carefully.
Sure. And if I don't store it carefully, and if I victimize you due to radiation poisoning, then maybe we can work that out. But I mean, I wish. I mean, this is really my first principle when it comes to my beliefs. I believe that I own myself, and until I affect somebody else's self-ownership, I've never done anything wrong. All we were talking about is speculation and pre-crime, and
Well, it's funny. Well, on one hand, someone might say that your perspective sounds absurd to them or new or unusual to them. On another hand, your perspective is the exact same perspective that Israel takes with regard to its nuclear weapons. They say, we are allowed to have a nuclear weapon. What you going to do with that?
Well, yeah, but the other thing we need to understand here is that they are allowed to because they are allied with the right clique of friends, where somewhere like Iran or wherever it is not, because they're maybe a wallflower, right?
Well,
so no, they're given international protections to be able to have them in the first place, where other nations are pinpointed and targeted to not be allowed to.
Should
right?
Iran be allowed to have a nuclear weapon?
I think that anybody can own anything that they want to. Sure. I mean, when was the last time Iran bombed anybody? And then again, when was the last time that Israel bombed anybody?
But that's a state, not a person. Do you think that a state should be able to own a nuclear bomb? Because you're saying
no, that's a moot point. A state can't own anything.
So then, but you're like, it's anyway. I didn't want to get aside. I want to go back to a previous point.
Right, I had a very specific point I wanted to get back to. So you believe, Anne, that there may be a way that you are going to be able to achieve cannabis liberty through the state.
Absolutely, absolutely, because the reason the state bans cannabis so vehemently is because the people who are profiting from the trade of cannabis right now are funding the state to do so, to protect their little niche in the market, whether it be as a prohibitionist, trying to keep people from having cannabis, or as an underground supplier, or as any one of the adjunct people like this, the counselors that provide rehab to people who are addicted, or adolescent assessments if the kids get caught with a dime bag. All these people have their livelihood at stake. The pediatricians, the psychologists, the drug testing labs. And it's no coincidence that when someone like Rick Scott becomes governor of Florida, he immediately passes a law to make you have to get a drug test by his wife's drug lab. So of course he
I'd call that a serious conflict of interest myself.
Right. So here we have a state where a situation where government has been hijacked by corporate interests to serve the will of the few at the expense of the many.
Yeah, this is where we're going to disagree. The government is not sponsored by corporate interests. The government is the only reason that corporations can exist in the first place. Corporations are a legal entity that are created by the government, and they are given specific government protections against having to be transparent or accountable to the people who prescribe to their service, right? So that's
nobility. They're hand in glove. You're absolutely right. But
right, they're all, and it's the nobility. They are definitely all in each other's pockets. Some of the people who run corporations are members of the Council of Foreign Relations and etc. I understand.
But the thing about self-ownership in general that I think people have to accept is that you may not realize the effects of your actions when you're in your own little milieu. You may not see the long-term or the global effects of something that you do. And so sometimes you need some kind of a collective consciousness that you could call a government or a state to kind of point out to you things that you may not see. For example, you may just be, going to the bathroom, but you may not see that that's drifting downriver to someone else who has to drink that water. And there may need to be some kind of community consciousness that says this isn't going to work out for the good of everyone because you can't do that.
I think community consciousness is is just violent terminology that leads to collectivism. What I would say a good thing there is, and I agree with the idea of communities, right? Like obviously, I like to trade, right, and I like stuff. So if my neighbor provides a service or a product that I want, I will trade with that person. So I'm going to build a reputation within my community and the other people in my community with me. So if I pee into the river and my neighbor down the stream notices that, he can go into his community and be like, hey guys, Michael's peeing into the river and we need to stop him from doing that. And then they confront me about it and escalate from there. If I admit to doing it and I made somebody sick, maybe I have to provide restitution. If I deny doing it and they can find legitimate evidence against me, perhaps I am punished or ostracized, or my reputation is destroyed within the community, right?
Right. So
I just don't see what, and you use the exact word state, and if what that implies is that you are willing to have others commit egregious acts of violence in your name upon other people just because that's what they deem or you deem is right or wrong. And I think you understand how slippery that slope can be.
Well, yeah, exactly. I'm saying, where's the line? Because you don't want to go down that slope, so you want to put a fence right at the brink. Where's the line between community involvement to educate people about the overall effects of their actions that they may not see, and an organized quote-unquote state?
Sure, yeah. In my opinion, that line is centralization. I believe in completely decentralized ideas, products, services, trade, unregulated markets, etc., right? So the point where that becomes egregious, or the point where that becomes dangerous, slippery, potentially violent, is when it becomes centralized, when the monopolization of violence occurs, right? When one person or whether it's elected or democratically representative group of people gets to make these determinations of what is right, what is wrong, what is crime, what is force, what is law, that's the line.
All right. Well, for example, if somebody lives in North Dakota and they want to eat a mango, how would they do that if everything's local?
They would maybe go on to the internet and buy one with whatever representative currency they wanted to use, or maybe trade a service or an idea or a product, or maybe they could talk to one of their neighbors who knew how to get mangoes, or maybe they could go to Florida and grow a mango tree. Okay, I'm not sure that they grow in Florida, but I don't see your point.
Well, my point is that right now there's some kind of there's a sort of centralizing, orderly arrangement to affairs that lets the people that have mangoes in the South where they grow.
Well, yes, this is because of government.
Well, I don't know if it's because of some kind of government is supposed to assist with that. There should be.
Yeah, that's just not true. And I'm sorry, that's not true. Government does not assist.
The buyers and sellers of mangoes are feeling so appreciative of government's assistance in the matter.
No, because
yeah.
Okay, no. If everything is just go out and go.
Look, if somebody wants to go out and buy a mango, Ann, they can go out and buy a mango. Listen, I can tell you 10 websites right now where it's super easy to buy a mango. I can go to, I think I can buy mangoes at Walmart.
Mangoes,
like that's not really on the scheme of my.
That's really good.
The things that I'm taking seriously.
You just pointed out something really important, which is that the internet created a global community.
Sure did.
Okay, so before the internet, if you lived in North Dakota and you wanted a mango, how would you get it? Without any arranged anything. No.
I would probably go to the supermarket. I mean, the internet only came out like 20 years ago, so
I understand that.
Stop and Shop still had mangoes.
But people back then felt like they needed some kind of guidance because they couldn't like go on the internet and find out where.
But they didn't need any type.
Because people have.
If there is something that is in demand, and this is, I know you don't like the term economics, but this is as just as simple as I can boil this down. If there is something that people want that is marketable, that other people can make money on, that product is coming to you. I promise. This is the baseline of really, you know, I don't mean to insult you, but elementary school economics, right? If 10 people come to you and they're like, hey, I want this kind of cannabis, you're probably going to look into getting that kind of cannabis. Am I wrong?
Well, so, okay, so go back to something simpler than that. Before you had, say you wanted the mangoes, and you're putting the mangoes on your back of your horse, and you're riding the horse from Florida to North Dakota to bring the mangoes.
Oh, wow.
And it goes through a mountain pass, and there's bad guys that are going to steal your mangoes as you're going through. Now, you're from Florida, so you have no access to this local community that you're going through with the bad guys that are pirating your mangoes from you. I'm just saying that
that's negligence.
For up on whom?
On the person trying to deliver the mangoes. That's negligence on their part. Maybe they should have sought out somebody to help protect them, or maybe they should have defended themselves and armed themselves, or whatever. You know, there's a risk factor involved in transporting things across large areas of geography, and you know, that's what the person is getting paid for, is to bring this stuff, and you know, there's a risk benefit that he's going to be compensated for.
The point I'm trying to make is that there's a really fine line between an organized society that lets all these different transactions happen and lets people get what they need and have what they want, and there has to be some kind of an overlaying organization on that people kind of agree to, and the agreement is based on wisdom, collective wisdom from wives who've seen what the effects that actions can have maybe years down the road or maybe miles away that you don't.
I still disagree with Ann on this is one of those rare occasions where I kept hearing her say, you have to have an organization to let these things happen. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to be perfectly frank. Everyone in my family, nearly everyone in my family has been an employee of one branch or other of the federal government, either the executive, the legislative, civil servants mostly, very few in the military, but some there. But I don't know how to say this. It seems like a lot of government is paying somebody to collect a tax, paying someone else to shuffle the tax around, paying someone else to distribute it, and that by the time it's done, 5% of what it was collected for is left for that purpose, and then administered very poorly at that.
Yes, at very best, the most efficient thing that government does is redistribute wealth, and that's it. And that is also the most virtuous thing that they do. If that tells you anything.
I grew up in an upper middle class family where my father was a mid-level manager for the United States Park Service, and for some reason he and his colleagues at the Park Service were giving blocks of government cheese back in the 70s, like huge, I don't know, like huge blocks of, it was surplus cheese that the government had purchased from favored dairy farmers by promising to buy it no matter what, even if the market wouldn't bear it, causing the dairy farmers to overproduce at the taxpayers' expense. And the government bought all this dairy, most of which was destroyed, but some of which was preserved in the form of cheese, and then just given away to the poor until the poor were sick of it, and then given to the civil servants, and then the rest of it thrown away. And it just strikes me that this is probably not an efficient agricultural policy or an efficient nutrient policy.
Right. Politics aside, you know, philosophy, economics, understanding of I don't know, sociology and morality or lack thereof, no matter what, the one thing that is not debatable here is that government is not efficient. They never have been at anything aside from extorting, in my opinion. Well, they're pretty good at bombs, I guess. You know, and yeah, I have to agree there. You know, the second that you centralize a concept, an idea, a notion, that's when it becomes unfree. That's when room for improvement is removed. Like, if I can't debate your idea, if I can't question your concept, then what kind of of idea is that really? Like, if it can't be questioned and it has to be forced upon people, then, you know, I'm fairly certain that there's room for improvement. And that's where the state loses me. I think that if these services have to be forced upon me, and services, whether it's the police or the military or the prison industrial complex or the freaking FCC, I don't care. If these ideas have to be forced upon me, you know, I have a problem with that. I'm pretty sure that me, myself, could come up with better ideas.
I mean, it's there that they're shown to be such blatant liars. Everything they say can and is being used against them.
See, and this is where we can agree. The state is destroying itself, and people like us, whether we have the same ideology or not, you know, we're both doing things. All three, and Alan, are doing things in order to perpetuate the fall of the state, and I think we can all agree that we hope that is a peaceful dissolution rather than maybe a violent revolution or an overthrow or something like that. I don't want that to happen at all.
It's not going to be violent. There's not. There can't be any more violence. If the state fell through violence, then the organization that arose would turn into another violent state.
Right. We are going to have to bring this to a close here, though. So what I'd like you guys to do, if you wouldn't mind, is to plug yourselves as hard as possible. Whatever your outlets are, maybe websites, maybe Facebook pages, maybe YouTube channels. If you guys could let us know about that stuff.
Oh, you go first.
Okay, well, we're the Healing Center in West Providence. I mean, we're the Healing Center in West Greenwich, Rhode Island. We help the most gravely ill patients and those least able to afford medical cannabis to make sure they have it, because nobody should be without. And that's what we're about. We're suing the state of Rhode Island right now for larger plant limits and increased cannabis access. There'll be more news about that. Keep your ears peeled, but we'll see how it resolves. We've got an advice column, Ask Alan and Ask Ann. That's grow advice, legal research about changes to the cannabis laws.
Where can we find that? Where can we find that?
Well, it's going to be coming out on the Buxton Hollow Farms Bugle,
which is a new e-zine or online magazine that's due out any day now.
Keep me in the loop on that one.
Absolutely.
Right. So there'll be recipes, there'll be cooking advice, there'll be health issues in the column, and we're working on a television show called Rhode Highland, where I'm the governor of Rhode Highland, the governess, I guess, and we'll have a news segment, the 420 News with Alan Gordon, and it's going to be very funny. And
I would be very willing to submit content to that.
Oh, superb.
That would be much appreciated. Designing, we have two inventions that we're working on. One is a machine that will automate the production of the oil that I make using the dry ice method. And the other one is a device like a humidor, but it's going to be called the Weedmador. And it will allow people to dry and cure their cannabis under perfect environmentally controlled conditions. So when you cut it down, you just hang it in the Weedmador. Comes out perfect. And if any of your listeners or viewers have money that they would like to invest in this, we are seeking investors to help us fund the development of some prototypes and the hiring of lawyers to write the papers so that the state will let us do it right.
Well, I've been telling you for months and months, Ann, you really need to look into opening a Bitcoin wallet. The majority of the people who follow me or I interact with do use Bitcoin and agorism and other such. But we really do got to bring this to a close. My microphone only lets me talk for an hour, so it's about all I got. I appreciate you guys coming on. You know, I've known you both for, I think, getting on a year or so. And thank you so much for coming on the show, Abolishing Authority. You guys can catch me on YouTube at Michael Freeman is the channel name. On Facebook at Abolishing Authority, or Don't Tread on Anyone, or my personal wall. I'll be back next week at the same time, 8 to 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The final cut of this video can be found on theconsciousresistance.com or on the Facebook or other social media outlets at the Conscious Resistance Network. Again, Ann and Alan, I appreciate you guys coming on, and you can catch me next week. Peace.